All right, so there's lots of new faces here. So I've got the cheesy slide with my face on it, which kind of makes me cringe, but it's kind of useful to know what who I am and what I've done over the years. So I've got about 15 years working with Microsoft productivity tools. My key experience really is Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams and voice and meeting rooms and all that sort of stuff. But over the last 9 months, since joining Lucidity Cloud Services, I've been focusing on really the entire stack, productivity stack, bit of security, and Lucidity specialization over the last 20 years has been remote desktop technology. So that's really what we're known for and what we're good at. And so that's been a really steep learning curve for me. So I thought, what better way to learn the modern remote desktop technology powered by Microsoft, but to have to present on it. So I've just learned all this stuff myself. Hopefully I've got it all correct, but we'll try and make this a quite interactive session, and feel free just to jump in if you've got questions, because there's a lot of information here trying to compare the two, and it's a little bit death by PowerPoint. I've tried to make it as easy to follow as possible, but if you want any clarifications, I will try and answer them as best I can. And I'm also a Microsoft MVP, as is Paul. I've been awarded that award eight times running now, so it's something I'm quite proud of, and that's really just for doing things like this, doing things in the community outside my day job around the Microsoft technology stack. So without further ado, Azure Virtual Desktop versus Windows 365, which is something new to the table. So again, thanks to our sponsors, and a special thanks to Nerdio, who we use as our basically management and provisioning solution for Azure Virtual Desktop. So I want to give them a special note here, because they've provided me some stuff you'll see later on that gives some price comparisons in New Zealand dollars, comparing the Windows 365 to Azure Virtual Desktop. All right, so starting with what is the same. So of course it's a remote desktop / virtual desktop technology. Both are powered by Azure. So they're running on the same stack. The difference being Windows 365 is in a Microsoft managed tenant, so not in your own tenant, so you don't have visibility of it. They're powered by the same remote desktop clients, and they're available on PC, Mac, iOS, Android, in the web browser. And hopefully if I've got time at the end, I'll give you a quick demo of what it all looks like. And also, I think Android as well, maybe that's in preview. I couldn't find it in the official documentation, but I'm sure I've read it somewhere. So, sorry, did I say Android? Linux is what I meant. The other thing is it supports OneDrive files on demand, which is really good, because this has been a problem over the last forever in remote desktop technology, because it was powered by Windows Server. And when you're doing shared desktops, that just didn't work very well. And so that's fully supported now, because we now have Windows 10 multi-session. You get the native Microsoft modern auth, so you can use the two-factor, all of that stuff, conditional access, that's all just built into the product. And you can do audio, video, online meeting, optimization using VDI plugins. And there are plugins for, in my example tenant here, I've got Zoom, WebEx, and Microsoft Teams is actually baked into the Windows 10 OS. So there's a sort of a native plugin. So when you use Teams in AVD or Windows 365, it just hooks into that. So that's really cool. So next up, some of the differences. So when I compare these two products, I'm going to be comparing the AVD stuff to the Windows 365 Enterprise. Because probably most of you out there will be using the enterprise product, not the business product, and you'll learn a little bit more about what the differences are in those two products after I've gone through the differences between what I'm calling the two enterprise grade products. So let's jump into it. So I've got really, all of these comparisons are going to be table-based comparisons. I couldn't think of a better way to show this, so this is why it's a little bit death by PowerPoint, but I'm just going to run through them, jump in if you want me to elaborate on anything if I don't do that to your satisfaction. So first off, as I just mentioned, Windows 365 is actually hosted in a Microsoft managed Azure subscription, so you don't have visibility of that in your tenancy, versus Azure is in your own tenancy, so you can see all your host pools, you can see your virtual machines, you can see all of that stuff, right? You don't get that with Windows 365. And there's a little bit of an architectural diagram there that Nerdio's provided. And you can see on this side here, this is the Microsoft tenancy. And with Windows 365 Enterprise, what they do is they pipe or inject the network into your own Azure tenancy. So you do have control over network within your own Azure tenancy, but everything else is inside Microsoft's tenancy. So you don't have any control of that, and it's all managed by them, basically. Windows 365 largely is fixed price compute. So you go and purchase this from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. You can go and purchase that, or via whatever means you purchase your licensing. The only exception is the network access consumption, which is actually billed out of your Azure subscription. For Windows 365 Business, there is no additional cost, right? So it's largely fixed price. There's not a lot of dollars in the network access stuff. It's egress only that's charged, so not download, only upload. So it's not massive, right? And I've got an example here. So 100 gig using their calculator, using public internet, is $15.80, right? So it's not ridiculous. Windows 365 Enterprise is managed by Intune, Endpoint Manager, and it's a requirement. So you have to have it. So you have to be licensed for it. So it's an additional cost to be aware of. And right now you have to use AAD hybrid join. So that means basically you have on-prem AD. Azure AD direct join is coming soon. So that's in preview right now, but obviously it's not production ready. In Azure Virtual Desktop, it's a lot easier to manage. You could use Intune, although improvements are required. Azure AD joins one of them, because if you're going full native cloud, you kind of don't want on-prem AD ideally. And we're largely pushing people that way, but there are some limitations there. Again, that will be resolved over time, and I think that also is in preview. So you could use Intune, you could use your traditional gold images, and something like Nerdio will help you manage those gold images. It does a lot of automations around your gold images and swaps them out and does all this sort of stuff. You could manually manage them because you've got access to the VMs. And there's this MISX app attach for managing applications, which I don't know a lot about, to be honest, but that allows you to manage some apps on those images without managing the images directly. So Windows 365, no access to the VM resources, as I've mentioned, right? Versus Azure Virtual Desktop, you have full access. So you will see your host pools, as I said, you'll see your VMs, you'll see your network connections, you'll see all of that stuff inside your Azure tenancy, basically. So something to be aware of. Windows 365 is 100% dedicated personal desktops, right? So all of the user's data is stored on that device. Versus Azure Virtual Desktop, you can do dedicated and shared desktops, and you can then obviously use some different methodologies to manage your file system. So you could use Azure Files. They use, someone on the call might be able to help me out here, FX Logics to kind of manage drives, which is kind of, it contains user profiles and VHDX files. So it's a bit more scalable from that perspective. And shared desktops support this Windows 10 multi-session. So you're no longer trying to make a Windows Server OS kind of look nice and sexy for the users. You just get Windows 10 multi-session and it looks exactly like what everyone's used to when they're running a laptop or a workstation. Windows 365's kind of got a prescribed CPU RAM disk combo, and there's 12 sizes today. So you can go from 1 VP CPU to 8, 2 gigs of RAM to 32, 64 gigs to 512 storage. Whereas AVD, you're flexible within the bounds of what Azure VMs can do, basically, and you've got access to premium SSD, which is certainly something you'd probably want. Well, I think it's something you would want if you're doing multi-session. It's just so much faster. So Windows 365 is Windows 10 Enterprise only, single session. In Azure Virtual Desktop, we've actually got Windows 7 extended support in there. So security updates provided by Microsoft to Windows 7 they are actually available, but you have to go on extended support. So you've got to pay for that to get Windows 7 updates. So if you've actually got applications that can't get off Windows 7, which a lot of people do, and that's holding people up moving into the cloud, Microsoft's actually supporting Windows 7 as a VM option with free security updates, basically, so you don't have to pay an extra. You got Windows 10 Enterprise single session, multi-session, and you've obviously got all the supported server versions that you can run in there as well if you want to do it that way. VM images, Microsoft has a built-in catalog that Windows 365 can access, and you can also upload your own custom images, up to 20 of them. That's not something I've actually tested myself. I don't know exactly how you manage them. I guess you have to manage those images outside of the bounds of W365 and upload them basically, versus Azure Virtual Desktop is a little bit more manageable because you can see those resources and you can interact with them, you can spin them up, you can do all that sort of stuff. So same applies there, built-in images, but any number of custom images as well. There's no native backup solution, but obviously you could install some third-party agent-based backup on each of the users' desktops. In AVD, you can use Azure Backup or a third-party backup option, which would you've got access to the network as well, so there might be some options there around backing up, because you've got, in both examples actually, you've got some access to the network, right? So you could back up, and I'm sure these third-party backup vendors will be inventing products as we speak. There's a little bit of self-service in Windows 365. You can't do a hell of a lot, but you can reboot your machine or reset it to factory defaults. So kind of useful. The user can do that themselves. AVD, there is no self-service unless you've got something like Nerdio that gives you a self-service portal for the users. And is that dropping off the page for you guys? It is for me for some reason. For Office app subscription, so in Windows 365, you can use any kind of app subscription, Office app subscription. But for Azure Virtual Desktop, you just got to bear in mind you need the shared computer activation version, which isn't only available in Enterprise. So if you have Office apps for Enterprise, you're covered. Business Premium, which has Office apps for business, actually still has that license capability as well. So either of those two will work. And I think E5 and probably E3 and various other combinations have that as well. So most people will already be licensed for that, but just something to be aware of. So now just having a look at business versus enterprise, just so you know the differences there. And I think most of you will agree, unless you're a pretty small business, you probably won't go business. But business is super easy. I can literally in 5 minutes go and procure a license, assign it to a user, and within an hour my desktop's up and running, and the user gets an email saying you can now log into your desktop. So literally no experience required. You don't need to really know how to manage it. It's kind of like just having a laptop, right? But it's in a virtual environment. You turn it on, you log in, and you're done. For AVD, you obviously need a bit of, I've got the wrong thing up here. That should be, dang, bit of a typo there. So on the left is business, on the right is enterprise. So apologies for that. So enterprise, you need a bit of experience, in particular Intune. You need to have an Azure tenancy. You need an IT team or someone that can look after this for you. So there's no subscription required in Windows 365 Business. So you don't even have an Azure tenancy, whereas for enterprise you do. It's Azure AD only for Windows 365 Business, versus AVD. You can use your own on-prem style Windows AD, and you'll be able to use Azure AD join very soon. It's in preview, as I mentioned. You've only got internet access in business, so you just get Microsoft Internet access basically. And in enterprise, as I showed you in that diagram, your network access is injected into your Azure tenancy, right? So you've got a bit of manageability of that. You will get billed for egress traffic, but you could do things like VPNs to your site, or various other things that you may already be doing in Azure will be supported by the business equivalent. There's no static IP option available yet in business. For enterprise, there is, because you have network control in your Azure tenancy. So there's absolutely zero transfer costs for business versus egress costs for enterprise. There's no native management solution for Windows 365 Business. So obviously you could probably bring a third-party thing to the table, like an RMM or something like that, running on the desktops. Versus enterprise, which requires Intune. So you have to have Intune, whether you like it or not, and whether you're using it or not, to manage the device day to day. No custom images for business. It is what it is. Windows 10, that's what you get. Enterprise, you have the built-in and the 20 custom images, as I've mentioned before. For business, your printers are accessed purely through RDP redirection, so on the local network. For enterprise, because you have access to the network, you also have the ability to VP into a site, for example, from Azure, and give people access to network printers. Oh, that's the end of that. So I just pause here quickly now that I've done the comparisons. Is there any questions so far? I'll go back to that one. Cool. So just on to licensing. So this is non-compute licensing. So this is not your Azure stuff, not your Windows 365 subscription. So Windows 365 needs a per user subscription, and no OS specific license is required. So you basically just procure that license. Non-compute licensing is not quite right here, really, because the Windows 365 license kind of gives you the compute. But anyway, so you need that user license, and that's it, right? You buy that license, you've got a virtual machine that for the individual user that you bought the license for. No Windows OS licensing required. But for enterprise, you need the same, but you also need the user to be licensed for Windows 10 Enterprise, and there's various ways to do that. And if you're not aware, Windows 10 Enterprise is actually a subscription license, and what it requires is that the user's primary device is already Windows 10 Pro. I think the other older versions of Windows, as long as they're Pro, qualify for this as well. But you have to have, let's just call it Windows 10 Pro running on your primary device, the user does, right? And then you need to add on a Windows 10 Enterprise per user subscription. There are other ways to license this. And if you go to my blog, I've got a whole ton of articles on all of this sort of stuff, and I'll refer you to that later. But you have to have that license. So as an example, Microsoft 365 F3, E3, E5 include it. Business Premium includes it. Enterprise Mobility E3, E5 includes it. If you bundle that with the Windows 10 Enterprise E3, E5, so you could do it that way if you're just doing Intuning of devices. So yeah, there's various ways you can license it, but that's an additional license. You need Windows Endpoint Manager / Intune, right? So it's another license you need, and you need Azure Active Directory P1. And I think all of those licenses I just mentioned, those bundles, include all of those things you need. So it may be that you already have all this stuff right now, but if you don't, there's obviously going to be quite a bit of uplift in per user per month spending to do Windows 365 Enterprise. For AVD, there's no per user license requirement. It's fully consumption based, right? So you're getting charged on usage inside Azure. And same applies for the Windows 10 Enterprise license, right? You need that license. And you're not bound to Windows Endpoint Manager or Azure Active Directory either for that particular way of doing it, AVD. Just some thoughts on when you'd maybe choose what. So I think Windows 365 Business is really suitable for really small businesses where it just needs to be easy and they just want a desktop in the cloud. And you don't really need to know too much about it. You don't need any desktop virtualization experience. You really don't even have to manage it if you don't want to. You don't need any kind of centralized management solution. You want 24/7 access to desktops, just like you would a laptop. This is another good example because this is a personal desktop that's always available and always running. It's another consideration, and you'll see a little bit more about this soon when I start talking about the costing. And yeah, local admin rights is another one as well, which is harder to do on a shared desktop. if not impossible. And you have no current or planned Azure footprint. So that's some good use cases that you'd maybe pick business. Enterprise would be suitable for small to large. A small business might want the manageability and control and security and all that sort of stuff, right? So, but this will scale up to large businesses. You don't really need any virtualization experience because the VMs are all managed by Microsoft. You do probably want some experience with Intune because that's going to be managing it and it's a requirement of the solution. Again, if you want 24/7 persistent desktops, this one's for you. And again, local admin rights, etc. So for AVD, I would say medium to large. It doesn't really scale down to small just because there's certain costs that you're going to pay for from a consumption basis right off the bat. As you scale it and have more and more users, it becomes vastly cheaper. You'll see that soon. So you would need some desktop virtualization experience. You would probably want experience managing desktops, images, management solutions for apps and all this sort of stuff, whether you're doing that in gold images or whether you're using Intune or third-party RMM, you'd probably want some experience there. 24/7 access is not required. I say that because that's where you get the cost benefits. If you're not using sort of auto scaling and cost savings that way, then maybe Windows 365 is maybe a better solution there. Shared desktops is a requirement of for that same reason. Pooling resources saves you a lot of money. And another really good use case is high fluctuations in users, people coming and going, seasonal workers, that sort of thing. So again, another nice graphic from Nerdio. I won't go over it because I've essentially kind of covered all of these points, but this is just a nice visual way of looking at what to choose. And if you just go and Google Windows 365 versus Azure Virtual Desktop, they'll probably come up top of the list. And you can go and read a whole lot more information about. They've written some really, really good articles actually on this topic. Okay, so in terms of costs, right? So this is all Nerdio graphics here, and in New Zealand dollars. So these are estimates, right? And they have some assumptions, and you can see the assumptions down the bottom here. And as I go through these, I won't go over them. I'm just going to high level cover the key point of the slide, but we will share these slides, and again, you can go and look at the Nerdio website. It won't be in New Zealand dollars, but you'll have the slide deck to help you compare as well. So in summary, Windows 365 is probably going to be more cost effective where you need dedicated personal desktops, and you've got people using them over 50 hours a week, right? You start losing over 50 hours, you kind of start losing some of the cost savings you'd get in the auto scaling. And AVD is more cost effective when users can be pooled, and you can realize the significant cost savings that you get from auto scaling. So just taking through some examples, right? So this is an example of a personal desktop where it's always on. So in that case, W365 is going to be cheaper. You also get the comfort of fixed price, and there's no term necessarily required. The personal desktop running 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, AVD is cheaper, and that's simply because of the auto scaling and not running 24/7. So what we're doing there effectively is we're turning VMs on and off. We might have a always on VM, and as we hit the 10th user, we'll turn another one on and another one on and another one on, and as people leave for the day, we'll turn them off, and that just happens in the background on its own. And in that case, you see the average savings is about 30%. For shared desktops that are always on, AVD considerably cheaper. And that's because you're taking advantage of auto scaling, but you're also taking advantage of multiple users on a desktop. And the other thing with always on is you would leverage the sort of 3-year pricing term, because that'll half the cost of each VM if you were running always on VMs. So you'd want to subscribe to probably the 3 years, I would imagine, because that will roughly half your costs. For shared desktops running 10 hours, 5 days a week, again, AVD considerably cheaper again, 72% cheaper, because in this case, we're taking advantage of the auto scaling, and we're not running 24/7, so we're ramping VMs up and down, and we've got multiple users on the desktops. Oh my gosh, I went faster than I thought. So now, because I've got time, I'll quickly just show you around what it looks like. I mean, it just looks like a desktop, but I'll just show you some of the tools and things like that. If you want some more info, I've written quite a few blogs on this recently, just to help myself get my head around it. And pretty much everything I've discussed is on my blog in a hell of a lot more detail. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly switch from content to desktop. Just give me a sec. So hopefully you're seeing my desktop there. Now, let's take you through. So this is Windows 365. So this is what you'll get as a user when Windows 365 is provisioned for you. So this is sort of the self-service portal, right? And you can go and open directly in a browser. I can restart my machine. I can reset my machine. I can go and download the desktop clients or get referred to get the mobile clients. So this is kind of what the user will see. From a turning it on perspective, you literally, I mean, I've just got a standalone subscription with a credit card in it, right? But I could just go purchase services. And this is kind of all you have to do, really. If you've got a credit card loaded, you would just go Windows 365. I want Windows 365 Business or Windows 365 Enterprise. Sorry, down here. I didn't cover hybrid benefit, but hybrid benefit's kind of when you've already invested. If you want, I think it's if you're already running Windows 10 Pro on the desktop, they kind of give you a discount, so you're not paying kind of twice for your licenses. So if you've got Windows 10 Pro on the desktop, you go with hybrid benefit. Doesn't apply for Windows 10 Enterprise because Enterprise requires that you have that per user per month Windows 10 Enterprise uplift for the user. But if you're going business, it does apply. So if you're a Windows 10 Home user, you'd need this. If you're a Windows 10 Pro user, you could take that and take the discount. So I can go in here, buy this thing. Then I literally go to users, and I'll go to my user who is licensed, this guy here. And you'll see here that I've got that available, right? So I just go and tick that, and that automatically provisions it. It usually takes about an hour to get the VM spun up and running, and then the end user will get an email telling them they've now got access to the VM, and they just use their corporate credentials or their Office 365 credentials that they subscribed with, and that's it. That's done. That's all you have to do. Versus Enterprise, once you've done this part, you've still got to hook yourself up to Intune, and there's various other steps that you've got to run through. And then you get the portal, and you can click open in browser, and you get this here. So this is me running in a browser. I could download the app as well. So this is the app. I've got multiple different desktops that I'm running. That's quick access into your virtual desktop if you don't want to use browser. So that's kind of what Windows 365 looks like. Nothing too exciting. It's just a desktop, but there you go. Then over this side here, I've got, this is Enterprise, AVD. So same thing. But here you can see I've got the WebEx client running, and actually I can't show you my system tray, but if I was to start a WebEx call or a Zoom call, because I've got the VDI plugin on my desktop, it will show that it's connected to the AVD session, and that will allow basically the audio and video to be handled on my PC versus inside the remote desktop, so that gives you a vastly better experience. And kind of just to show off quickly, I can actually join this meeting right within AVD, and I'm probably going to get some feedback, and I didn't have time to figure out why that was, even though I'm muted and my speaker's muted, but probably because I'm on the same system with the same audio devices, something funky's happening. But anyway, I'll join the meeting just to show you you can do it. I don't know if you're hearing that feedback, but I'm hearing it. But there you go. That's me inside AVD. I don't know what the quality is like for you guys on your end, but it's video inside video inside video. But it works pretty good in practice. It actually tends to take a little bit of time just to get the quality up. But did you guys set quality reasonable, or has it caught up?
Still a bit fairy, Andrew.
A little bit fairy. Right. Well, it doesn't normally say ferry this long, but it could be something to do with my scenario that I'm in a video call and I've got all sorts going on here. So anyway, I'll kill that. Jump out.